My name is Gareth Rhodes. I'm about to be 30 years old. I'm 29, born in 1988. I was born in Kingston, and I currently live in Kerhonkson.
And what are you doing?
I am running for the 19th congressional seat. I'm a Democratic candidate seeking to challenge Representative John Faso this fall.
Okay, you can look at me.
Okay.
You don't have to look at that, because I'm close enough.
Okay.
There are a lot of Democratic candidates. What makes you stand out?
Absolutely. So first, deep local roots in this district. Born and raised here. Grew up working on a farm. Also, not just from here, but also my story. I think is very much a New York 19 story. After I got out of high school, went out and got a job. I drilled water wells, volunteer firefighter. Worked weekends at a little deli in town to make ends meet. Put myself through college. First, my family, immediate family, to earn a 4-year degree. And I think that is very much a pretty typical New York 19 story. About 70% of this district actually doesn't have a college degree. The average income is about $50,000. This is where I came from, and it's something that is important to me, that when we run campaigns, that we're not just focusing on certain parts of this district, we're focusing on the entire district. So we've been going to every single town in the congressional district, about a 1999 Ford Winnebago. So we're going town by town by town by town. And to me, this is both the strategy we need to do to win this race. We have to show up in every single town. We have to fight for every single vote. This is going to be a tough race, no matter who the Democratic nominee is. But having a candidate who has unimpeachable local roots, a candidate who has government experience. I'm the only candidate running who has actually worked in government here in New York State before. I've spent time in those small towns and villages out in the Catskills after Hurricane Irene. I fought for marriage equality, including here in this district. So this is, I think what I bring to the table here is someone who really knows this district, someone who's from this district, someone who's worked in a government capacity in this district, and that will give us a real shot to defeat Faso this fall.
Why don't you go into a little bit about your political background?
Sure. In college, I started doing public service work. I first got an internship in college at my local congressman's office. That was down in Harlem at CUNY. Then I did an internship at the White House. I did an internship in the Attorney General's office. And that led to a job right after college. I won a Truman Scholarship. It led to a job right after college up in Albany in the governor's office. Went from a low level in the communications office, rose to become the governor's traveling press secretary. Worked there for about 5 years. Spent a huge amount of time here, a lot of time here in upstate New York, working on all sorts of different issues, helping take pretty complex policy issues, translate them to public-facing language. I spent a lot of time after a lot of the storms that we had, both Irene, Lee, Sandy, in downstate, winter storms out in Buffalo. Spent a lot of time, as we've seen, how climate change has been bringing a lot of these monstrous storms here to upstate New York. So I spend a lot of time working in that kind of government capacity around the state, and I think it's given me an appreciation for what government can do. It's given me experience in some of these towns, which I've been to as part of my Rhodes trip, as I'm calling it, going to every town. I've been there before. This is not my first time there. I was out at Sydney. Sydney is the largest town in Delaware County, has the biggest employer in the county, which is Amphenol, a big manufacturing plant. I was there after Tropical Storm Lee when it was basically completely flooded out, and they were considering leaving. And I was part of the process, which helped them build a new facility. I was there for the ribbon cutting of their new building, and I went out there in my campaign, and I knew people there already. This was not my first time there. And I think if you look at the entire field, there's a lot of good, qualified, smart, good candidates in some ways. But having someone this is not their first time in these towns, someone who's worked there before, who's been there before, who people know, someone who has the experience, someone who knows that this district is not just the Hudson Valley and Catskills, it goes much further beyond that. The needs of Kingston are not the needs of Kinderhook, are not the needs of Kerhonkson. This goes beyond that. And that is what my campaign has been about from the very beginning. It's about spending time in these towns, learning what the local issues are, and putting those to the forefront of my campaign.
What are the local issues?
Here in Hudson, or beyond, or
throughout. But here in Hudson and Catskill. But
so there are issues of commonality throughout our district. Certainly on the healthcare issue, we talk about. We've heard this in almost every town we've been to, but it's different depending on where you go. I'll give you an example. Here in Hudson, I've heard some things that I've not heard in other parts, and out in, let's say, Delaware County. So there's 19 towns, I believe, in Delaware County. We've done events in 17 of them. Every one of those events, someone has mentioned to me the fact that Delaware County, which is the largest county geographically in this district, does not have a maternity ward. None. That's the same in Schoharie County. That's the same in Greene County. That's not something you hear here in Hudson because you have a maternity ward here in Hudson. It's not something you hear in Kingston because we have 2 in Kingston. This is so the healthcare needs are different. The common need I've heard is someone approached me at an event and said, we have a spaghetti dinner healthcare system. They're like, what does that mean? Like people eat too much spaghetti? He's like, no. I could go to my Rotary Club or church every night of this week and pay $20 to fundraise for someone's local healthcare expense. So there is the need for, even though many people have private health insurance, their healthcare needs are not being met. I've met a lot of parents who are on make just too much to be eligible for Medicaid. Medicaid is one of the top sources of funding for opioid addiction treatment in this district. And I've met a lot of parents who have been taking out a second mortgage or going into debt or tapping into college funds to be able to fight the cost of opioid addiction. So healthcare is certainly a common issue throughout the entire district, but there are also unique issues depending on where you are. I was in Berlin, up in Rensselaer County, and I think 2 people at their event said, we used to have a bank in town, a community bank. It closed, and now we have to drive, down to New Lebanon or out to Brunswick or to Rensselaer to be able to access a bank to cash our Social Security checks. That's not an issue here in Hudson. So these issues are different depending on where I am, but there are certainly common ones too.
Okay. Where do you stand on gun violence? Or gun restrictions or whatever?
Yeah.
Gun reform.
I call it common sense gun safety reform. We've seen too many shootings happen across our country. New York, we're lucky to say, has a fairly low gun violence rate. NY-19 has a low gun violence rate compared to other congressional districts in other parts of the country. But I am heartbroken when I see these school shootings happen and these mass shootings where a mad man basically takes a weapon of war and is able to kill dozens of people very quickly. So that's why, to me, common sense gun safety reform is important. It will save lives. Universal background checks, making sure no matter in what forum you buy a gun, you have to pass a background check. Safe storage laws. If you own a firearm, it should be stored safely. In this district, one of the causes of gun deaths are accidental shootings. Children finding guns underneath a couch or something like that and going off accidentally. That and suicide are the 2 of the bigger ones in this area. So that's why safe storage laws are important to me. Allowing us to actually get statistics on gun violence. Right now the CDC doesn't look at this as a public health crisis. The ATF, I don't think, actually has anything beyond paper records. So looking at this, allowing the federal government to actually be able to have the resources to understand the impact of gun violence in our communities, and making sure that certain types of weapons aren't available for sale. I do believe in the same assault weapons ban that President Bush and George Pataki supported, 2 Republicans. This is, to me, common sense. There are certain types of weapons which should not be sold. It is not a slippery slope. I respect the Second Amendment, but these military-grade weapons do not have a place in our classrooms, on our streets, and that's why I believe in an assault weapons ban.
Do you own a gun?
I grew up in a household that owns guns, and there are several guns in my house right now.
You're a 29-year-old guy.
Yeah.
There's some readers who will think, who does this 29-year-old kid think he is running for Congress? Who do you think you are? Like, why? I
am someone who represents this community, and I am spending the time to learn these issues better than any of my competitors. You will not hear my competitors talking about the lack of maternity wards in 3 counties of this district. You will not hear my competitors talking about the fact that our local fire departments and EMT services are struggling to find volunteers, and many are shutting down and being forced to privatize. I represent what the needs of this. I am representing in my campaign what the actual needs of this community are, and I have the energy to go to every single town. It's that ability and that desire to serve this community, and that I've shown throughout my entire career. I didn't use my college education to go off and make money. I used it to serve my community. I've done that from the very beginning. I'm young, but I know this community like the back of my hand because I grew up here. I've spent my entire campaign, over a year now, I've been out going town by town by town. And it's easy to, pick a congressional district and raise a ton of money and say, I'm going to represent you. That's the easy way of doing this. The hard way of doing this is actually spending the time on the ground in each of these towns, speaking with the people that you hope to represent. And I'm not just talking to Democrats. I'm talking to Republicans. I'm talking to independents. I'm doing events in diners, at firehouses, at farms that go beyond just campaigning for office. It's about taking what I hear from people in these communities and putting it front and center in my platforms. I was out in a little town named Morris, which is actually right now by Shenango County. And we did an event at Nicole's Diner. I chatted with a gentleman named Pete there on the street afterwards. And I gave him my information. He gave it right back to me and said, I've never voted for a Democrat in my life and I never will. I said, well, just out of interest, what do you care about? What are your issues? And he said to me, well, our fire department, which is right across the street, we can't find volunteers anymore. And the volunteers we do get are being forced to go to Albany or for the training requirements have become so onerous that it's turning people away. Our schools we keep hearing about our schools having to merge with other school systems because we've lost so many families and the populations have gone down. And our snowplows, we keep tearing up our sidewalks on the street. And we keep having to pay taxpayer dollars to repair these things. It's like, what part of a Democratic platform doesn't address these? I believe in an infrastructure bill to help our fire departments. We give a lot of federal money for new fire trucks and equipment and radios, but how about operating aid? How about a tax credit that's more than $200 a year to support our volunteer firefighters? Infrastructure bill to make sure our villages and our towns are able to actually have the type of snowplow that can fit on the streets. Because if you aren't plowing the snow properly, you're going to be. This is an issue that people look for when they try considering where to live. Support for local public schools. We have an administration that's gone after teacher training grants. That has federal government pays for pre-K, they pay for Head Start, they pay for after school, they pay for teacher training. These are all issues that I've addressed as part of my campaign and that I care deeply about and that will make a difference in that town. So that to me is what separates me from my competition here is I am going to be the pothole member of Congress for this community. When there are needs in Hudson, I will be there, even if they're local and state needs, because there is the member of Congress is, you're not just voting on legislation, you're the ambassadors of this community, the representative of this community. And I am young, but I have done in my campaign, and I will do in Congress a better job of representing this community than anyone else.
Where do you differ from John Faso?
On which issue? I mean, well, John Faso, let's take gun safety. He voted against universal background checks. He voted against safe storage laws. And when he was in Albany, he has consistently opposed the assault weapons ban. John Faso took tens of thousands of dollars from the NRA. I will never take money from the NRA. John Faso has refused to do public town hall meetings in this congressional district. He hasn't had the respect to go out and look his constituents in the eye and say, ask me a question. Tell me what's on your mind. He voted to take health care away from 65,000 people in this congressional district when he was on the budget committee, as a member of the budget committee, and then on the House floor. He promised he would not vote to defund Planned Parenthood. He turned around and actually voted twice to defund Planned Parenthood. You go issue by issue. I grew up hiking in the Catskill Mountains. I grew up striper fishing on the Hudson. When he was in the Assembly, actually opposed the efforts that George Pataki, a Republican, tried to put in place to require GE to clean up the Hudson River. So on every single issue you could take, I'm on almost the opposite side of him on these. And this is Faso. When he ran, he tried to cloak himself as a moderate in the Chris Gibson kind of model. But we've seen from day one he's been anything but. He has not been a moderate. He hasn't shown up. He hasn't taken the time or doesn't have the respect to listen to what's happening to so many people in this community, what's on their minds. And that is the opposite of me. I'm going to every single town in this district, and I've promised I will go to every town in the district every year if I have the privilege to be elected to office.
Why do you think there are so many candidates this year for the Democratic spot?
This is Faso is vulnerable. I think there's no question about it. This New York 19 has been ranked one of the most flippable seats in the country, or something like that. What do they call it? Flippable. And so this is, I think, attracted. We've had, I think, people who've recently moved in here, to run for office, who've said this is a seat that I could win, and I'm going to move here to run. That's not something that's new to New York 19. We've seen that the last couple of cycles on the Democratic side. But this is, it's a seat that can be won. So I think that attracts energy and attention and money for sure. And that's what we're seeing here.
So you're 29 years old. You should be out partying.
Partying.
What made you say, I'm running for Congress?
I firmly believe that if you take each of these issues, if it's the environment, if it's healthcare, common sense gun safety, the same people that created these problems, I don't think we can expect to fix them. John Faso got elected to office first in 1987. 31 years ago. In 2018, he's running on the same issues he ran on in 1987. Same exact issues. So either he is part of the problem, or he is completely ineffective. He's one of the two. We need a new generation of leaders to come into Washington who aren't interested in fighting the same battles of the past. I'm not interested in going and fighting are you a Hillary Democrat, are you a Bernie Democrat? I'm a Democrat that wants to do something for the town of Morris. I'm a Democrat who wants to do something to help the people in these small towns in New York 19. That's what kind of Democrat I am. And I cannot kick the can down the road on things like climate change, because I kick it right to myself. And all these issues we talk about, if we're destroying our environment, if we're destroying our climate and our planet, what good is Medicare for all if we don't have a planet to live on? I was out in Hillsdale talking with, I said this story the other night at the forum, talking with Debbie at the inn at Green River, and Debbie was saying, we have these storms that come into our community more often than we've ever seen before, and the intensity is such that we haven't seen before. And if you're a bed and breakfast, you're only making money a handful of weeks out of the year, hunting season, leaf peeping season, July and August when folks are coming in. She said if your power is going out on some of those weekends, you're having to give refunds. The wells aren't pumping water. She said, but a generator is expensive, more than $10,000. I would like to see a climate change resiliency fund to help farmers with the cost, the flood mitigation, to be able to build the kind of barriers that you need to prevent flooding from continuing to happen and destroy their crops. Small businesses like Debbie's out there, bed and breakfast, a generator. Some of these power lines that we see in our district are almost always above ground, putting them underground in certain parts where they keep going down. Things like that could actually help make a difference. And this is about business. This is about jobs, economic activity in our district. Broadband, that's another big one, which I know as being a younger candidate how important broadband is and how important cell phone service is to keeping our young people in this district. Being young, I think actually is a real asset on the political side, because so many parents here have seen their kids leave. They have people my age who grew up here, went to college and never came back, or went to college here and then left because they couldn't find a job. And having someone who knows how hard it is to find a job after high school, someone who knows that not having broadband is a real killer, this gives me the personal and emotional connection to these issues that Faso certainly doesn't have, and that I don't think that my competitors, that I don't think that they can line up with when you look at my background and my record. So,
when it comes to polling so far, do you have any idea where you stand?
There hasn't been a public poll yet done on this race.
Have you done any internal polling, and do you care to disclose what you've done?
I don't want to disclose anything on the internal side, but I know there was a recent poll done on one of the most active online Facebook groups that listen to us, John Faso. I think more than 2,500 people, activists or members of it, and they put up a poll for about a week asking members of the group who was the Democrat who they were supporting and best prepared to take on Faso, and I came in first place by a pretty substantial margin, which to me reflects the work we put in. We have a campaign that has a presence in more than 100 towns right now in this congressional district. It reflects we've raised nearly $1 million, which is as much money as Zephyr Teachout had last term. But how we've raised it, I've consistently led the field in low dollar fundraising. The amount of money I've raised from $200 and below. Consistently led the field in local fundraising, money raised from this congressional district. There is someone running in this district, I think, who is actually leading all Democratic challengers in the nation in terms of the ratio of money coming from out of the district into this district. I have led the way in organized labor. I'm the only candidate in this race who's been endorsed by local labor unions. Yesterday, the Teamsters endorsed me. Teamsters 445 is the largest local labor union in the Hudson Valley and Catskills, supporting my campaign. So this is, by I think every metric you look at, we have put together the campaign both to win the primary and then really form a coalition to beat Faso in the fall.
We heard with the Teamsters endorsement, that's interesting you bring that up. We heard from sources that last election, Teamsters members voted for Trump in many, many cases. How would you change that? Why would they endorse? I mean, the union bosses endorse you. How are you going to appeal to the rank and file?
The union, the leaders announced the endorsement, but this is I think something that is a collaborative process. The leaders don't endorse someone. I don't think that their members wouldn't support. I've been fighting for something called the Butch-Lewis Act. The Butch-Lewis Act is a federal bill that would protect pensions of many local Teamsters unions across the country. This is a bipartisan bill. Peter King, a New York Republican, is a co-sponsor of it. I've been calling on John Faso to co-sponsor it. He has refused. And that is something that really speaks to many, protecting union pensions. My record on fighting for issues of importance to organized labor, if it's standing up to this Janus decision coming out of the Supreme Court, standing on the picket lines. Teamsters is not the only union to endorse me. The Communication Workers of America, Local 1120, more than 2,000 members in this district endorse me. So this reflects both my background in fighting for issues of importance to organized labor. When I worked in the governor's office fighting to raise the minimum wage, fighting for my proposals for good paying jobs in this district, if it's broadband, job training, vocational training and apprenticeship programs. But then also the organized labor, John Faso has not been a friend to organized labor, and they want to pick a candidate who can win. We've seen in this district, even though we have more registered Democrats than Republicans, we've lost a seat by 9 points and by 30 points, even though the Democrats outraised the Republicans both sides. So the labor unions here are making a calculation that we have to pick the candidate in the primary who is best positioned to beat Faso in the general election. And that's, if you look at their statements of support, that was a big part of it too. A candidate who's with us on the issues, who's committed to keeping jobs here in New York instead of going to right-to-work states, keeping jobs here in the country instead of going to foreign countries, who is with us on the issues, but then also can beat Faso. Someone who can. There's over 100,000 members of organized labor here in this district. Someone who can best appeal to those workers. And I have a working class background here. I left home with $50 in my pocket. I went out and drilled wells. I was a volunteer firefighter. I know what it's like to get my hands dirty. I grew up on a farm. So this is, to me, it's reflective of who I am, my working class background, and my desire to fight for labor unions in Congress.
I have a question, actually. When you, a little while ago, you were talking about issues of commonality in the district, and you brought up health care. What do you think needs to be done with our health care system? What would you vote for if you're elected or support?
I support Medicare for all. I support transitioning our healthcare system from a system that's based on profit to one that is not based on profits. I think as long as private health insurance companies have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders rather than a sole commitment to the patients, the needs of the patients, we're always going to have this issue. We spend 18% of our economy right now on healthcare, $10,000 per year per American for private health insurance, almost twice as much as any other industrialized nation combined. So we spend the most money, so we should be number one in health outcomes and results. But unfortunately, we're only 37th in that metric globally. So we're spending the money and we're lagging behind in results. That's a problem. And that's why, to me, Medicare for all We're spending the money as a country already. Let's just redirect those resources. There's no need for the CEOs of some of these massive health insurance conglomerates to make $70 million a year. Let's transition this to a not-for-profit system. I like the Israeli model, 4 regionally based not-for-profit systems where best practices can rise to the top. Healthcare is compulsory from birth to death. And if you so choose to buy a private supplemental plan on top of it, you can. But every single essential service, like maternity care, for example, is covered under this plan. And everyone pays into it, just like you pay into Medicare on your paycheck right now.
So do you support, I know like Bernie Sanders has a bill right now. I think it's about Medicare for all. You support.
So he has a Senate bill. I support the House HR 676.
Okay.
And this is what this does separate a number of us in the primary, where some of us would, some of us wouldn't. There are candidates who support only a public option. Now, would a public option need to be better than the current system? Yes, but if you come to the negotiating table and only support a public option, you're going to walk away with very little. You need candidates who can come in with a much bolder proposal and which to me is Medicare for all, which is where we're going to go. We're going to get there eventually as a country. It's inevitable. I mean, every other industrialized nation does this except for us. We're going to get there eventually. The question is, how do we get there? And if you come in and you're only proposing a Band-Aid to fix the old system instead of transformation of this system, I think you're going to end up with not with actually addressing the root cause of our system's failure, which is its for-profit motive. Yes.
Talk about specific issues to Columbia and Greene counties, the big ones that you think you can tackle while a congressman.
Let's start with Columbia. Let's start with Hudson. Why not? Okay. Affordable housing here is important. This is not just low-income housing; it's middle-income housing as well. And I remember coming here when Warren Street was plywooded up from water up here. I remember those days well, and people weren't getting on or off that Amtrak either. I see the progress that this community has made, and it's a good thing. I know that there are people who have said, this progress isn't what we wanted. This is good. This is, if you look at I've been to many other municipalities in upstate New York that have not seen the renaissance that Hudson has seen. And the work that Mayor Rector is continuing to do now after Mayor Hamilton, to me, I think is good. And we need to, my focus is making sure that what's happening on Warren Street, the economic success, I don't want to see people who've lived here for a long time being priced out, completely out of their homes. I want to make sure that our neighbors on Columbia Street also can have the opportunity to participate in this economic renaissance as well. So to me, this is investing in affordable housing, making sure that we have quality affordable housing on the low-income side, on the middle-income side. There are places like New Orleans, Oakland have actually, in much larger scale, but when they've seen this kind of renaissance happen and prices going up very quickly over a short period of time, have taken proactive steps to make sure that there is housing for low and middle income people. So the people who work in Hudson can actually live in Hudson. Those are the policies I would want to put into place. If it's when housing is being built, making sure that there is enough affordable housing stock within it. We have right now, you have a STAR tax credit for homeowners, but there's almost no support for renters. So support for long-term renters, 6 months or more. So you're not giving that away to people like Airbnb, for example. Things like that, I think, will make a real difference in our communities and make sure that as our city has come roaring back, everyone is able to participate in this process. Everyone is able to share the fruits of success. That is what I care deeply about. Beyond Hudson, Columbia County, I think Columbia County is like number 2 in the state for its lack of internet access connectivity. Essex County does a better job. Essex County is in the high peaks in the Adirondacks. And I don't see a lot of, Mount Marcy isn't in Ghent, for example. So broadband, I blame Charter Communications for failing to stand by the agreement that they agreed to with the state in the merger to run the fiber optic lines into many of these small towns. We enforcing that agreement. and perhaps raise the fines or restructure it in a way that they're actually bringing this investment that they promised. I would expand the federal government's commitment to rural broadband. My ideal solution is make internet a public utility, just like electricity. Lyndon Johnson ran for Congress when he was younger than I was, on the promise of bringing rural electrification to rural Texas, bringing electricity to rural Texas, and people thought he was crazy. How on earth could you do that? You're going to put up poles and run wires on them that bring electricity. How can you do that? Well, what we call now telephone poles. And he did that. This is something that should absolutely be seeing across Columbia and Greene County. This is, if you talk to a bed and breakfast owner in Greene County, or like a wedding venue, for example, they're not going to have, the Blackhead Mountains on their internet website. It's going to be, we have Wi-Fi, we have cell phone service, because you don't want to get married at a place where you can't put your pictures on Facebook that night or on Instagram. When people coming up from the city, you're going to be able to come up on a Friday and work and leave on a Monday and still be able to work. It's an asset that we're so close to the city where people can spend a 4-day weekend here. So internet, very important to me. The opioid crisis, what Peter Volkman is doing up in Chatham should be a county-wide model, where your law enforcement is part of the solution, where anywhere in the town of Chatham, you can pick up the phone and call the local sheriff, and they're saying, how can we help? You're guaranteed a bed that night. It doesn't sound that difficult, but for too long, I don't think law enforcement, we've looked at this drug issue as sometimes too much of a criminal matter than a public health matter. So I like to see what Peter's doing. Chatham Cares, see that expanded. Other issues that I see is related to internet cell phone service. This is something that hurts our first responders. It's something that I think actually I've spoken with local real estate brokers who will say, I go to try to sell a house, and someone will just pull out their phone and say, can you take me somewhere else? That's an issue when you have young people who want to stay in this district. So improving that. Affordable housing is not just an issue in Hudson, it's an issue in Copake, it's an issue in Hillsdale. I was actually speaking to the owner of Catamount, who told me he has like 65 full-time employees year-round. I didn't realize that. Like, you think ski slopes are just up in the winter, but they have all these things going on all year. And he said almost everyone, and he pays them a decent salary, doesn't live in Hillsdale. They commute in, some from more than an hour away. So workplace housing. So making sure that there's housing that reflects the economic status needs of these communities. So if you pay your workers $45,000 a year, which is a pretty good salary in Hillsdale, sometimes even more, there is housing that's able to support that as well. Greene County, I remember being up in Windham after Irene, when the Batavia kills flooded the entire town. So more flood protection investments, which is almost all federal money, is important. And it's the same thing with like cell phone service, like up and down Route 23 is critically important. And Greene County is the one county in this entire district that doesn't have a higher education institution. Now you have the Columbia-Greene Community College here, which is here in near Hudson, which is fantastic. But maybe we could do something over in Catskill. Maybe we could do something over in Athens or Coxsackie that could help on that line. And then I also want to see public transportation expanded. Delaware is the 8th largest county in the district geographically. There's not a single public transportation system in it. Sullivan doesn't have a lot going on in that regard as well. When I got out of high school, I rode the UCAT bus for a while until I was able to buy a car. So this is personal to me. But a public transportation system, it's hard to make money off of public transit. It really is, because there's not a lot of riders when you first start. The buses are expensive. The drivers, you got to pay them a salary. But to me, if you live in Canaan or Ankram, you should have if you want to have a bus loop that takes you to certain places, that runs more than once a day or twice a day, can make a real difference in these areas. It takes time to get off the ground, so this has to be a long-term commitment. If you start a bus service, it might take a year before people really start saying, hey, this is an option for me. But that's something that I want to see as well. What's the best part about all those issues is that none of them, I think, are partisan. They're all like things that both sides should be able to agree on.
Well, what about the valley communities in Greene County? You mentioned the flooding and lack of a higher education facility. There's tourism, maybe too much reliance on it, not enough of anything else.
Yeah.
That's good for bringing in people, but not
Sustain.
creating jobs or sustaining any kind of labor force. What are your thoughts on that?
It's an issue. I mean, but the first question to ask is why in these areas, why in the valley communities, isn't there industry beyond tourism? I think what you could point to is in Prattsville, in Ashland, in Jewett. I mean, the connectivity is it's almost non-existent. You know, if you want to run a credit card in some of these areas, you can't. That's step number one. Number two is if you're living in Jewett, the closest hospital to you is going to be out here in Hudson. The closest you could drive out, I guess, to Roxbury, but or to Margaretville, but that's not really a hospital. It's like a health center. There's just the access, the quality of life is just is different than what you have in other communities. So until you can, in some ways, invest money in making these towns more a place where a business would look and say, oh, it really makes sense to live there. There's people who are, we have a workforce. We have it's a place where people want to live. I think of this in work, play, live, right? The three parts to a thriving community. A place where people can work, people want to live, and there's the amenities. We have two of those, I would say, almost as good as you could do anywhere. On the play, I mean, you have the Catskill Mountains. If you want to go up to the Adirondacks, you have that. We have the Hudson River. We have on the natural assets, we have all of that. Live, yes, there's public schools in this district that needs more support, but for the most part, our schools are doing well. Could do better. We could do more, have more support. But it's a place where people do want to live. I was speaking with a business owner just south of here who said, every time I call someone up and hire them and they live in a different state, I say, take 2 or 3 days, call me back. I'll come back in a few hours and say, I can't wait because this is a place I want to live. People want to live here. I think the work is that last element to it, and it's about making this a place where businesses want to invest. Let's make sure we have a trained workforce. When they built that new casino down in Sullivan County, they were hiring carpenters and electricians and welders and plumbers from Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. Like, why aren't those people from our district or from the community? You know how hard it is to find a stonemason in this district? I mean, there's just a lot of those trades and those vocational jobs aren't being filled, and that's an issue for me. That's an issue that we could fill. We have BOCES. We should do apprenticeship programs that match that. So none of those are a silver bullet unto themselves, but I think there is. If you can provide those job training programs, it helps with the opioid crisis. It helps with bringing industry, even on a small level, into these communities. That can help give it an economic base beyond tourism. And you're seeing in Catskill. I mean, Catskill, what you've done here in Hudson is spilling over into Catskill, and that's gonna.
They'll tell you it's the other way around, but it's all right.
I think it's this way around, right?
I don't know. In Catskill, they'll say it's.
Oh wow.
It's coming this way.
Shared.
So let's talk about back to national and international tariffs. What's your view on what's happening now with tariffs? How's it affecting local areas?
I was up in the town of Broome, and I had someone from Conesville come and say to me, he was a contractor. He puts tin roofs on sheds. He said his cost of business, the average cost of his roof has gone up over $400 because the tin has gone up over $1 a foot. So that is directly tied to the tariffs. We've seen this with the I saw a store up in Latham with one of the manufacturers up there, which is not in the district. We have an aluminum producer in Coxsackie who's been hit by this. So this is hitting our area, especially in terms of aluminum and steel. I mean, almost all construction projects use steel. So this is affecting us. And now we're starting to see countries like Mexico, which are doing the retaliatory steps, which is going to start really hitting our farmers hard as well. I mean, the initial tariffs, a lot of the pork from our district doesn't necessarily go to China. It's more locally sold and sent. But some of these other tariffs are going to start having an effect because these other countries will put in place retaliatory measures which affect this district. So to me, this is all being done it's being done because the president, he wants to look like a tough guy. He wants to look like he is going after China. He's going after these other countries, America first. Well, it's not America first if America is ending up in the last place with the effect of these things. So Congress should take action. Congress should say, Congress should take some sort of action to stop the president from doing this, and restore some sanity. And if we're going to put in place, if we're going to restructure our trade agreements, do it in a thoughtful way. Do it in a way that's not jeopardizing American business, and doing it in such a slapdash fashion, and doing it so hastily, and doing it via tweets rather than thoughtful policy proposals is just irresponsible, and it's affecting people here in our district.
Are you out of water?
I'm fine. I drink too much water.
I'm sure you have one.
What do you think of the president?
President Trump?
Yes.
He's an embarrassment. I think that's where I would start. It's no matter how you feel about him on the political side, and I wake up in the morning and I read what he does on Twitter. It's just embarrassing that we have a president that, in the way he approaches the job, it seems almost like a small child, attacking people in such personal terms, pursuing policies that have nothing to do with a well-thought-out policy proposal, but purely for political reasons and for rolling back the Obama legacy. Pulling out of the Paris Agreement was one of the most destructive decisions he made while in office. North Korea and Syria are signatories to this agreement, and the United States pulled out because Steve Bannon was the last person to talk to the President of the United States. What does it say about the word that our country gives in future agreements? It's hurting our nation for generations to come. And to me, this is why you need new people in office, younger people in office, because this is the bill of goods we're being handed. Our nation is being led on the wrong track by a president who, his investment in the future is remarkably different than my investment in the future here. We're the ones who are going to be fixing the mess he's making, and what better time to start than now? We're the ones who have to pick up the pieces from pulling out of the Iran agreement or pulling out of the Paris agreement or these tariffs, and what it will say about Americans standing abroad. That's why, to me, taking back the House is so important. This is our opportunity to tell the entire world, America is not Trump country. America made a mistake in 2016 by electing Donald Trump, and we recognize that mistake, and we're taking back the House as the first step to taking back our country.
What about, where do you stand on immigration? And if you were elected, what would you support to affect that issue? I
support a Clean Dream Act. We have dreamers in this district. I was out at the diner, the Oakhurst Diner in Millerton, and the chef came up to me after our event and said, "I heard you were running for office. I just have one concern. My son is a student at Dutchess County Community College. He's studying computer science. He is one of the 800,000 dreamers. Been 23 years old. Been in this country for 20 years, but covered by DACA. And please, this is someone who's being recruited by businesses in NY-19 to work here. We need this young man in our community, and this is happening across the district. So Clean Dream Act, for sure. A lot of our farmers, I grew up on a farm where seasonal labor in Ulster County. Seasonal labor in Ulster County is huge because we're apples, vegetables, the seasonal crops. In dairy country, it's seasonal labor is less important because you milk your cows year round, even though immigrant labor is very important. So protection. I know many families who didn't come, even though they had visas in the past 2 years, because maybe you got a traffic ticket back in the 1990s, and we have a county in this district, Rensselaer County, that has deputized their officers, their sheriffs, as ICE agents. And they basically have the same authority as an ICE agent to pick up undocumented immigrants in this community, or really terrorize even documented immigrants in this community. I did an event in Austerlitz, and a contractor came and said, you know, I spent $25,000 a year last year on my workforce, all of whom have visas, all of whom are here legally, just defending them against what's been happening with INS and ICE. So this is, to me, it's affecting our district, but it goes beyond economics. This is an entire immigration policy, which is based on a very simple premise, which is, if you are white, you're welcome, and if you're not white, you are not welcome. This is the entire president's approach. That's why he said we need more people from Sweden, but not African countries. I mean, it is based on racism. There's no other way around it. And it's like every one of these policies hurting our congressional district. Immigrants are our neighbors. They are our pastors, our friends at school, our teachers. We are all unless we are the descendants of Native Americans, we all are immigrants in some form or another. This is the Hudson Valley, going back to the days of Eleanor Roosevelt, has been a place of where immigration, you could go back to the Huguenots who settled in New Paltz across this district, where we've always been a welcoming community to immigrants. Many from who've sought a political asylum or left war-torn countries have come here, and this entire approach is just completely, to me, un-American. It is saying to the entire world that one of the reasons people respect America is because we're this melting pot of different societies and different beliefs, and you can come to America. I mean, my story, I think, is the American story. I left home with $50 after high school. Neither of my parents were college graduates. Went out, didn't own a car, worked as hard as I possibly could, and now I'm running for Congress. I mean, that to me is the American story. And that's why people love this country. That's why I love this country. And I'm running to make sure that is there for the next generation. And the entire Trump administration approach to immigration is saying that's not who America is. And Fasso's part of that. Fasso in 2016, when he ran, he opposed giving any type of pathway to citizenship to the 13 million undocumented immigrants living in America right now. I would pull back up that 2013 Gang of Six bill that went through the Senate, bipartisan bill, went past the Judiciary Committee, passed the Senate. This was Chuck Schumer and Marco Rubio. I mean, this was a bipartisan bill. Pathway to citizenship. I would bring that back up again and fight for it, because I don't look at these neighbors of mine as illegal immigrants. I look at them as neighbors who came to our country, and because of the backlog at INS, because of a number of different issues, have been struggling to either get green cards or things like that. But many other productive members of our society are working here, or depended on by the local farmers and the local business owners, and I will stand up and fight for them.
Do you have have you endorsed anybody in the governor's race?
I've not been asked to make any formal endorsements. I don't think I will be asked to make any formal endorsements. But I've worked for the governor for a number of years. I think the primaries are a good thing. I respect primaries. I think that the 2014 gubernatorial primary was a good thing. It helped. I think it was helpful in the state banning fracking, which was great. So I think primaries are good. They're good for the party. They help candidates become sharper on the issues and campaign more and become more responsive to the needs of their district. I am concerned that Cynthia Nixon it's reported that she doesn't support the property tax cap. To me, it's in a district like ours in upstate New York where we see high property taxes. I think it would be dangerous to have a candidate at the top of the ticket who people believe wants to raise property taxes. That would, I think, hurt our ticket all the way down to the congressional level. So to me, the ideal scenario here is have Cynthia Nixon on the Working Families Party line, have the Governor Cuomo on the Democratic line, and then have the Democratic nominee on both those lines. So if you like Cynthia Nixon, you'll vote for her on the Working Families Party line, and you'll vote for me on the Working Families Party line. If you like Cuomo, you'll vote for him on the Democratic line, and you'll vote for me on the Democratic line. So a little bit selfishly here, I want the ticket to be divided that way, because my focus is on beating Fasso. But I worked in that office for for years, and we worked hard. We worked to pass marriage equality. We spent a lot of time in these small towns in this district after the storms, So this is about a record. If you run for office, we've seen what happens when people who've never been in public service before enter public office, and you see that in the White House right now. It's important to have people who have experience, who take this seriously, who have a record, and are approaching this in a way that is actually to do things to help people. That's what is at the core of my campaign. Is each of those stories I've told today is about someone I met who has come to me with a need, and that I've, in my campaign, I will fight for that in Congress.
I guess the other thing to ask you is, if you are elected, I mean, it could be a possibility that you could be voting just with the investigation into the president. What are your thoughts on that, or your take on if you were elected, you could have a hand in maybe if impeachment came up or anything that?
Well, let's let the Mueller probe conclude first.
Mm-hmm.
I think any talk of impeachment before you know what all the facts are is premature. Let Mueller be finished. Now, from what we know from reading the news, if everything that we think is true is actually true and is backed up by fact, then yes, there will be grounds to start that process. But let's wait till the facts are there. Let's wait until we actually know what happened, and then let's take that step. But I think any American, if Republican or Democrat, just reading what you read in the papers about what happened in this campaign, where the chairman, your campaign manager is under criminal indictment for colluding with a foreign country, that is troubling to say the least. But let's let all the facts come out, and then let's move forward from there. But I don't believe that you should pursue impeachment for political reasons, for policy disagreements. It should be reserved for high crimes and misdemeanors, as our founders set out.
So is your view that the president can pardon himself?
That's an interesting legal question. I've read both arguments on both sides. I'm skeptical of it. I've read scholars who I respect deeply, legal scholars, former law school professors who have come out on different sides of this issue. I don't believe the pardon power was initiated and given to the president it was intended for the pardoning of the presidency itself. I think that would, if you look at the approach, would have kind of subverted the impeachment process, right? If you could, but I could see how reasonable minds could disagree on this one, but I don't. I think that if the president attempts to do that, it will be a sign of things being pretty bad. If you have a president pardoning himself, there might be a good argument that maybe he should not seek re-election again.
I think one of the basics you kind of talked about, just about your background. Can you talk about your education, where your academic degree is from, and what are they in?
I went to CUNY City College. First, my family to graduate from a 4-year college. I got a degree in political science and economics. Actually, I spoke at my commencement ceremony earlier this week. Very inspiring experience. And then I went to law school at Harvard, which I did 2.5 out of the 3 years. When I was considering running for this seat, I sat down with the leadership of the school and said, I'm considering running for this seat. And they strongly encouraged me to focus on it full time. So I decided to take a leave of absence. I will finish my law degree, win or lose. And so I will be an attorney, hopefully within the next year or two.
Wow, so you took I don't know if they probably didn't call it a gap.
Oh, leave of absence. They've had a number of students who've done the same thing that I've done.
Wow. So, and then you took that past year, and you said you visited. Can you say how many towns again?
So 163 towns and cities here. I've been to 150. I've been to 153 of them. I'm doing 2 more this afternoon, so I'll be 155. I'm doing 3 more tomorrow. It's 158. And then by Monday, we will do the end. So on Monday, we're going to drive from the smallest town in the district, which is Hardenburg. And we're going to go to the largest which is the city of Kingston, 23,000 people, and we'll do a celebration to announce that we've done that.
Your Rhodes trip, right? You called
Yes,
it,
the Rhodes trip.
Yeah.
And if I become the next member of Congress, when we win this race, I promise that I will go to every town every year. So it's something that I will continue to do, and that to me is the ultimate statement of accountability. Whereas the things that I have promised on the campaign trail, this is how I'm going to first make sure I stay in touch with what are the needs of this district. The complete opposite of FASA, who does not seen anywhere. But second, this is how I will continue to update our neighbors on what's been happening in Washington, and continue to hear what's going on in each community.
That's gonna be tough, because you're gonna be up for re-election the following year after you get elected.
What better way to run for re-election than actually being out there talking to people?
That's true.
Yeah, it's true.
That's why I'm doing it. I think the whole model is wrong in my mind, which is raise as much money as humanly possible. The only money you should raise is money to be, spent on ads in the Register Star, right? I mean, that's, but raise as much money as humanly possible. Blanket the airwaves with nonstop. Make these consultants into millionaires for giving the advice of I always find the political consulting funny, right? It's like get more votes than the other person. I mean, that's like the advice, right? Convince more people to vote for you. I mean, I don't think this is rocket science. Talk to people, tell them what you believe, what you stand for, hear what is on their minds, and take the issues you hear in this community and promise to fight for them. And that's what I've done from the very beginning. To me, that should be how it is, but it's not. The model is raise as much money as you possibly can, conduct polling, like have people call and ask people what they think, and then take these poll-tested messages that have been smoothed over by the consultant community and put them on TV, universal health care, or this, that. What's missing in that scenario is the person who's running for office never actually talks to their people they hope to represent. And then the issues like the fire departments, like the maternity wards, like cell phone service, you don't see them talked about in campaigns because those aren't the ones that are coming up in the polls. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's why I will do it every single year, and I'll proudly be the pothole congressman. Proudly. Because that's what I think you should be. There's only 700,000 people in a congressional district. I give everyone my card, has my cell phone on the back, and my personal email. There's no need for you to be a stranger in these areas. So that's what I do. And that's why I think we're going to win, and why we should win.
I don't think we talked about your family. I don't know if you're married, kids, or what you're...
I'm not married. I have a significant other, Alexa, who I've been with for nearly 3 years. She just graduated from law school, clerking for a federal judge, by the sort of clerkship for a federal judge. And my parents live down in Esopus still, where I grew up. My sister and her husband live nearby, just up the street. They're both teachers. They're both teachers. They're high school teachers at a place called the Mount Academy near Kingston. My uncle lives in the town of Rochester. He's an electrical business. My aunt works in New Paltz, so I have a lot of family in the area.
Got the roots.
The roots. My grandfather was a janitor at New Paltz High School.
Well. Anything else?
No, I think we covered it, although I did step out.
Yeah.
Well, there is one
Yes.
thing we never mentioned. You said two of your important strategies for success here is our experience and taking issues seriously. So where do you think that leaves North Korea with Trump, and where are we headed with that? Is this going to be a success? Is this going to be
I have a hard time keeping up with this one because
part of the deal?
every day it's like the meeting is on, the meeting is off. Dennis Rodman's coming. It's in Singapore. I mean,
Changes and, yeah.
it's like every day it's something new. This is to me the problem of Twitter diplomacy, is when you are. His entire approach is in many ways a PR stunt, which is tweeting tweeting Rocket Man. This is a serious issue. Can you imagine living in South Korea The President of the United States is goading the North Korean dictator on his Twitter account when you are living, and you know this guy's a madman, and he has nuclear weapons, and he is not really afraid he has really nothing to lose here, or not just in South Korea, and in Southeast Asia. This requires a serious approach. I would put forward a diplomatic effort, which is not based on Twitter, which is based on engaging China. North Korea is dependent on China economically. They have to be. China has real interest in this not becoming a nuclear wasteland. So engaging China, engaging the regional stakeholders, and maybe you could work together with the North Korean administration to facilitate some sort of change. I mean, you read these horror stories from what comes out of North Korea, how they torture people, these work camps for minor crimes. This dictatorship, the way what it has done, is wrong. But the approach to fixing that, I don't think is via Twitter. I think it's through a diplomatic effort that brings the Chinese being a real part of this process, and recognizing that North Korea is a country that's struggling economically, and maybe you could use that country's needs and that country's desires to leverage a future that's better for the North Korean people. But I think the president's approach is very could lead to some serious unintended consequences, because we're dealing with an irrational actor here, which is the leader of North Korea.
Did anybody ask you about the tax cuts?
No.
Where do you stand on those?
Well, in general, you support people paying less in taxes. We are up here in upstate New York. We are paying high property taxes, higher than I would like us to pay. That's why I believe in an infrastructure bill. An infrastructure bill with lower taxes, with lower property taxes, because we are asking in our municipalities, whenever they need to fix their sewer and water systems, to keep bonding it out, putting it on the local taxpayers. When those fire departments are privatizing, that's the local taxpayer paying money to do it. Yet we as a state send $48 billion more a year to the federal government than we get back. This is a fundamental inequality that our property taxes and our income taxes are paying for infrastructure upgrades in Indiana and Illinois and Kansas and across other states instead of here in New York State. So my approach to lowering taxes is infrastructure. Let the federal government pay for these expenses. We're giving them the money. We've paid them the money. We're giving them $48 billion a year. That's not coming back. Let the federal government pay for these things, because we are paying for it, but we're giving that money away. So, and that's how I think we could lower taxes. This tax cut bill hurt New York State. If you pay more than $10,000 a year in local and state taxes, you're going to see an increase. 160,000 taxpayers in New York 19 will see their taxes go up. Faso, 24 hours before this bill passed, was undecided. Now, he said, I'm still studying it. Well, he has been elected to the state assembly since 1987. The SALT, removing SALT has been on a federal issue for that entire time. So he's really had 31 years to consider. He served on the state assembly when he was the minority leader. He served on the budget committee. So he has very well aware what the impact of rolling back SALT would do to New York State. He knew about it. And as you had Lee Zeldin on Long Island, forcefully against it, on TV, on giving speeches on the House floor. Peter King, Republican from Long Island, speeches on the House floor, public statements, letters to the editor against it. Faso, silent. Does that little telly town hall on Tuesday, and says, there's a lot to like in the tax bill. What was his evidence? The estate tax provisions. So people who have $5 million estates, now that's up to $11 million. I don't think that tax reform should be geared at people who have $11 million estates. Not a lot of them in New York 19. So to me, he completely failed on tax reform. No speeches on the House floor, no TV appearance, no standing up for when this district was under attack. He was nowhere to be found. Nowhere. The last minute, Paul Ryan gave him permission to vote no, which he did. But absolutely no leadership on this whatsoever. He talks nonstop about the scaffold law. Scaffold law, a big federal law. No, it's a state law. This is a law that he had the chance to fix when he was in the assembly. And if he cares so much about the scaffold law, guess what? His assembly seat is open. He should run for it again. he should run for governor. He should try, if he wants to fix a state law, then he should do that instead of using the federal government to try to coerce this legislature to his will. So, to me, the tax bill is one of his great failures. He will say that he voted against it, which he did, but he did nothing. I mean, his party is in the majority. His party controls both parties, both houses of Congress, and the presidency. I go right back to my original argument. He's either ineffective or he's part of the problem. You got to pick one of the two because there is nowhere else to go.